Hello, America and around the world. This is Charity Smith, Miss Mogul, and we are here this morning with our second installment of a wonderful series I'm doing here on Mogul Talk with the one and only Paul Schumann. Now, I'm going to introduce him in just a second, but if you have not done so already, please know that we are streaming live on Facebook as well as YouTube, and this show will be carried and distributed by JD3 TV. We're super excited about that. Now, connect with our community on our Facebook page. You can go to Master Your Morning with Miss Mogul, provide your feedback, your questions, and your comments about the show. You can also connect with Paul there if you want more of his information. We'll have it listed there for him as well as his website. And so we want to make sure that you all know we are available on all of these streaming networks, and we want you to be a part of the community. So please chime in with your questions and concerns. And if we can just eke out a couple of minutes, maybe Paul can answer some of your questions on air if we get them in time. So without further ado, I want to introduce now Paul Schumann. Now, if you tuned in last week, we kind of left you with some cliffhangers, and we're going to bring all of that in together, right? We're going to tie those knots together. But listen, you all, here is why you need your laptop and your latte this morning. Paul has over 40 years. First of all, he's the president of Wise Wealth Incorporated. He has over 40 years of debt elimination, building wealth, and showing American business owners and citizens, for that matter, how to leverage, how to get out of debt, how to turn their economic situations around and really flourish. And I can't think of anyone, I say that all the time, but I had the pleasure of hearing him on my friend's podcast. Shout out to Connie out there. But I heard the content this gentleman shared on there, and I became a number one fan instantly because I know my stuff. I know what I know. And so when I heard Paul talking about debt elimination and credit and how to circumvent some of the tragic situations that can happen, I was instantly messaging, yeah, he's right. Paul is on point. Listen, go Paul. And I instantly became a fan of the work that he does for the American business owner. So without further ado, welcome to the show again, Paul Schumann. It's real early where you are, so I really appreciate you showing up this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Artie. And I'll just clear up a couple little points. My background is actually 50 years in business, 46 of them being in real estate, 40 of them being a licensed broker. Prior to that, I was a builder developer in real estate finance. I was a mortgage lender for 20 years, and I have 5+ years in debt settlement professionally, as well as several other degrees on my wall. I actually have a bachelor's science degree in chemistry, which allowed me my logic thinking when I worked through some very difficult problems. Yeah. So there's a whole different thing, and it's Wise Wealth Choices, Inc. Mm-hmm. So it's wisewealthchoices.com is the website. However, it's under construction right now because we're rebuilding to start bringing in a lot more data and information to help people. This is going to be a place where you can go to and really learn about credit, debt, finance, negotiations, and information. But it's going to take me a little while. There's a lot of information out there. And I want to put it so that people can understand it. I mean, there's hundreds of books out there that have been written, and I've read a lot of them. And they spend so much time in the minutia, you forget what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
That's so true.
I'm going to try and cut through that and make it simpler so you can actually read it and go on, oh, I can do that, instead of reading pages and pages and wondering what you're supposed to do. So it's coming, but it'll take a little bit. So that being said.
In the meantime, though, the community can certainly connect with us, and we will put you in contact with Paul. And also we'll connect you to some of his social media platforms. We're connected on Facebook and some other places, so you can get in contact with Paul. I think that's the thing we really want to drive home to the listeners. You can get in contact with him. And I don't know why I wrote down 50 years. And, not to date you, but yes, to call you a sage. You've been doing this more than some of us have been alive. You know your stuff, Paul.
See, once you pass 70, people say, how did you do all this? And I says, well, spend 50 years out there in the business world, and eventually you'll bump against almost everything that's out there in the finances. Because I also had life insurance license, securities license. I've had a whole bunch of things in my life. So all of that gave me a background along with holistic health certifications and ideas, because what I've found is knowing the person you're working with is 60% of what you're dealing with. Because if you don't know their personalities and how to work with them, you'll say the wrong thing. They won't hear you. And I'll get into that in another time. But right now, let me jump back to where I was a week ago.
That's going to be really important in the negotiations part. When we start talking about the skill of negotiation and knowing your client, let's go back, as you said, to the cliffhanger. When we left in the first show, you were talking about a client who was over his head is an understatement, in deep with some debt, over $100,000. Tell us about that story and where we left off. Pick it up from there.
Okay, so what I left off is he was $178,000 in credit card debt.
Ouch.
He had already gone past 6 months. They had used up all of their savings, and they were facing now attorneys. So these are collection attorneys that have the ability, because they represent the original creditor, to file lawsuits and basically take them down. Now, there's two parts to this story. My negotiations, I do really well with collection attorneys because I know
no one does. Okay, that's a whole story in itself, but wow. Okay.
So I know how they think. So it took me a little while to understand and create the right hardship letter. A hardship letter is critical no matter who you're dealing with in trying to get a negotiated settlement, because they're going to read that and understand why you got into trouble. And is there a way out? Mm-hmm. Do you have a future? So this hardship letter basically left them hanging with massive medical problems. So I got to the heart of the attorney and going, so what can we do? The attorney actually came up with a settlement number that was pretty amazing. So by the time I finished the negotiations, out of the $178,000 he owed, he saved, after paying me and everything, he saved $100,000.
What?
Okay. He saved $100,000, never had to pay it. Now, yes, there are tax implications to that, because depending upon your personal financial statement, if you are legally bankrupt, meaning you owe way more money than you have assets or the ability to pay, you're technically legally bankrupt, even though you may never have filed. Mm-hmm. And if you do a settlement like that, there are no tax ramifications.
Okay, stop. So let's go back and recap a few things, because you, in that story, unloaded on us. First of all, let's go back to how, because I've talked to clients as well, and I'm telling you, Paul, I would never think there was space in the settlement for a personal interest story. My point is that hardship letter. Most of us, I would never think that had any bearing on the ability to negotiate through there.
Yes.
But having the ability to articulate the story and create the picture. Yeah, this is happening, or it has happened, but this is how we plan to move our way through it, knowing that has some bearing on the settlement. So for those of you who are taking notes, this is why you need to talk to Paul. There is the personal interest story there that goes into the big picture. So it's not all about numbers, but certainly it's about the person behind the numbers, right? Mm-hmm. And what that story and what that picture looks like. But then for you to say that you were able to negotiate a settlement where this gentleman did not have to pay $100,000 and talk to us about the tax implications. You said if you owe more, rehearse that one more time.
Okay. There's regulations in the tax code the IRS looks at, and basically it says if you're legally bankrupt, and I don't mean you file bankruptcy. There's a definition.
So that's a chapter 11, chapter 13.
Any of them. It doesn't matter. They're all the same bankruptcy. You have to meet certain criteria. And primarily the criteria are you owe more than you're capable of paying. Meaning, say you're $130,000 in debt and you have $100,000 worth of assets and you're not working or you're making minimal income. Technically, you're bankrupt because you owe more than what you're worth. So you're underwater. If you're technically bankrupt and you do a settlement, the IRS says there's no tax implications. Because technically, if you get $100,000 worth of savings, that's like income because you didn't have to pay it. It's like somebody gave you the money or whatever, it's income. However, again, and these are technicalities to the law. If you're technically bankrupt, you don't have to pay it. And most people that are really, really serious and in trouble could be technically bankrupt, and they have no idea because they don't know what the definitions are. And again, there's different ways of the definition, how it works.
So that threshold is really that low, where it's just a matter of you proving that you owe more than you can pay, and then you're legally bankrupt.
Yes.
And there are no tax implications to that. Now,
Yes.
how does that work then? If there are no tax implications, there has to be an impact. And we know credit is an impact. But what other impacts could there be then in a settlement like that? And I'm talking negative and positive. So we know one of the great things about it is that you kind of get from under the debt. But what are you left with after that?
Okay. There's two things. There's two possibilities to what you're left with afterwards. I'll explain. When I'm doing the negotiations, I try and eliminate the two things that are out there.
We like that.
Okay. So primarily what's happening is on your credit report. If you do a settlement with anybody in a debt collection or whatever, they're going to put down one of a few different things, either settled for less than the full amount or, charged off, unpaid, something that's really negative. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, when I'm negotiating with them, and it's one of the key points, and this is something that most people forget. In your negotiations, you have the ability to ask for things like, if I pay you this money, will you remove that negative line item from the credit report as part of the negotiations? Because if I'm going to give you money, I'm going to want something back. And it doesn't cost you anything to remove that line item, but it will benefit me. So therefore, I am willing to give you an extra couple dollars to make that happen. So in my negotiation standards, what I look for is whether it's a debt collector, the original creditor. Now, the original creditor has a little bit of a problem doing that. Just so you understand, they're under federal regulations if it's a bank or a credit card company. And typically, they don't like to violate credit things.
For sure.
However, if the line item disappeared because of an inaccuracy on it, that's a different story. And that's something we can do at a different time. I'll tell you about
that's
that
the finessing of it.
that's the credit repair part that I help people with for free. If they're my client, I'll send them a letter. Matter of fact, I've sent two people just recently letters, and they were stuck. They didn't have anybody. And I said, listen, here, just take this letter and sign it. I already filled it out. And they said within, I guess it's 30 days, both their collections dropped off the credit report and their score went up from 650 to 757.
With one letter? With
one letter.
Okay.
Now,
Paul, are you the credit fairy or what? So go back. Let's go back, because here is where, and I'm saying it facetiously, but I know business owners who are in over their heads right now with debt and with just the burden and the angst of having that looming over their head, and they really don't know how to get out of it without paying thousands of dollars and thinking that they're going to get just, ransacked because they don't understand the negotiations part. Right. Why is it so important? And I'm overstating an obvious question, but I really want people to understand who's speaking to them. Why is it important to have someone like you at the table during this time? So we know we're going to have to declare a bankruptcy, but we don't want to come out of it so scathed that we can't bounce back. Why is it important to have someone like you at the table? Well,
I can phrase the question a little differently. Okay. If somebody sues you and you go into a court, do you want an attorney with you, or do you want to try and know all the laws by yourself and spend thousands of hours in a law library? The difference is,
that brings it home.
Okay. If you're involved in anything that's serious to where there's somebody on the other side, you want a professional on your side.
For sure.
And I've shown people, matter of fact, there was another example, just another friend of mine who screwed up on the statute of limitations and paid a creditor that was more than 10 years old, which you don't have to pay at all. The state puts out what's called statute of limitations, which states in any type of a contract agreement, if you stop paying, I mean, $0, no more, nada, don't even acknowledge you owe the debt. For in California, it's more than 4 years. Wow. They have no ability to go into court and sue you. And if they attempt to do that, they're in violation of state and federal laws by harassing you if you pass the statute of limitations. Once that happens, even though the debt is still legally there, they don't have any way of collecting from you because they can't go into court, they can't get a judgment, they can't attach your wages, they can't do anything. They can't go after your bank accounts. It's just like they're dead in the water. So their ability to collect drops to almost zero. All they can do is ask, and if you say no, there's nothing they can do about it. They just go away.
But it stays on the credit report, right?
Has nothing to do with the credit report. This has to do with the federal and state statute of limitations. And it has to do with the time of the very last payment, physical dollars. I don't care if it's even $1. It's whatever the last payment was you made to that creditor and stopped. And from that point on, you never acknowledge the debt. They call up and say, I don't know that, I don't have any money. I can't do any of that. No, it's not mine. Go away. You never acknowledge the debt. If a debt collector calls you and says you owe, it says, well, validate the debt. I don't think it's mine. And they, never ignore them, but you have to use the right words in order for them to get frustrated enough to potentially not call you back. And I'll explain that in another thing, just in a few seconds. Okay. So everything is in how you set it up. It is so much fun. And
I can tell.
Here's an example. Another friend of mine called me, and she's been involved in finances for probably half her life. Wow. And she does high-level negotiations and multi-million-dollar loans and deals. And yet she didn't even know the simple basics of how to deal with creditors and stuff because she had gotten into a mess because of a big project that went down and caused her some turmoil a while back. And I'm talking about years ago. She's fine now, but years ago she had it. But this was just traveling along on her credit report. And a debt collector called her up and said, you owe us this money. Now it was way past everything. And she said, I don't think so. Can you validate that debt for me? I don't believe I owe it. Well, what she found out is that I think it was a week later, that collection dropped off her credit report and her score went up 80 points. Because the mere fact that the collection agency had no legal right to come after them because they had no documentation. See, it's one thing when a collection agency calls you up and says you owe. You don't know if it's real or not. And I'll tell you, because several collection agencies dig in and they try and find old debt and nobody did. And they make a call thinking they can harass you, intimidate you, and confuse you into saying, yes, that's my debt. Once you do that, you trigger the statute of limitations to revert themselves back to zero. Because you say, yes, that's my debt. I owe it. Oops, you just cut your throat. Okay, don't ever say that. As far as anybody ever calls you, I don't know if that's my debt. I don't understand the numbers. You need to validate the debt. And then you have to put it in writing to them. So make sure you get the address and the name of the company and an account number and saying, I don't believe this to be true and correct. I need you to validate it. They have to go back to the original creditor and actually get physical copies of every single solitary thing you charged on that. And for people that have had it for years, it could be 100 pages of documents proving to the penny that you owe the money. Now, most creditors won't do that. Some will if it's fairly current. In other words, it's only like 6 months old. They've got it in right on their computer screen. They can print it out. But if it's archived, meaning it's been a year or two down the road, A lot of them, they go, I've already sold this debt off. Nah, I'm not interested in doing that. It takes up the creditor's time and energy and money because they have to hire one of their employees to go and dig it out and then send it. So a lot of times they just ignore it. If it doesn't come through, that collection agency can no longer call you. They can't validate the debt. They can't do anything with you. They basically have to say, sorry. And then they sell the debt off to somebody else for even less money. Now it's like 2 or 3 cents on the dollar. But you never have to pay it because you're never going to get an actual answer out of it. Well, that's one way. That's how I work and manipulate.
This is so good. This is so good.
Now, let me get back to a little comment on the hardship letter, why it's important.
Okay.
The hardship letter explains, and it typically, especially to an attorney looks like whether or not they can ever collect from you. If they get a judgment, can they collect? And if in the hardship letter you explain how things are so bad, you don't have a job, you have no income, you've had a lot of illnesses and sickness in your life. Right now, you're still dealing with them. You're head over heels in debt. They are not the only creditor. And even if, you get back to work, you're on a limited ability because of your medical conditions and all of the other problems you're having. The attorney looks at that and going, if I get a judgment, what are my chances of ever collecting it? And if they know that their chances are slim to none, they contact the original creditor and saying, we can't collect off of this. If we get any settlement, we're going to take it. So I come back in at 30 cents on the dollar, for if it's within a collect. In other words, it hasn't passed the statute, but it's still within that range. And I want to get it off the books. So I'll sit down with the clients and say, who do you know that can lend you money? So your $10,000 debt can go to $3,000 and get it off the books and potentially get that negative item off your credit report so you can start rebuilding your life again. And then we work into my fees after that. But there's a lot of different things that people have to understand. There's a lot of moving parts to it. It's not simply just calling them up and saying, I can't pay it, or I don't have any money. You need to get into where they understand when they read something, because attorneys read documents. Debt collectors try not to. They try and use it. They try and use intimidation and harassment and basically, games to trick you into saying something that you shouldn't say. And that's why, and a friend of mine just did this the other day. She owed $20,000 on this debt. It had already been 10 years old. She ended up paying $6,600 for it. And I said, why? You didn't have to pay him a penny. She says, I got scared. They kept saying they started to intimidate her, and she panicked. She said, I didn't know the statute of limitations things could really work. So I got really scared and I agreed to pay him money. So they lost $6,600 because they didn't bother to say, wait a minute, let me look into this and have somebody call me. Even with my fees, it would have been less than what they paid them.
Paul, it's almost mind blowing. And I figured we'd run up to the time. We only have 6 minutes left in the show.
Oh my God.
But Paul, it's okay, because I'm telling you, anyone who has tuned in today, just the nuggets you've laid throughout the conversation has saved somebody thousands of dollars, no less, and probably given them an exhale and a good night's sleep, knowing there is a solution outside of the worst case scenario.
Well, I got a couple minutes. Let me jump on that trust thing.
Come on. We got a couple minutes. Go ahead.
Okay. So when I went back in the other one, what I said I had to do was restructure his trusts. And I tell people again, never, ever, ever put a trust in your name. Don't put it in a family name. Put it in the name of a dog, and a vacation spot, anything you want, XYZ Corp, leasing thing, because it's something called skip tracing. And what skip tracers do, especially attorneys, is that when they're trying to figure out whether or not they're going to sue you, they're going to type your name into a skip tracer. They're going to type in your geographic, and they look for anything in your name. If they find a trust that's been recorded in your name, they're going to go, money
Uh-huh.
time, we got you.
Yeah.
But if they can never find it because it's never, your name doesn't show up anywhere, they're going to go, oh, they got no assets. And they look, well, you own a house, don't you? No, I'm renting a house from this company. And you actually have to have a real lease agreement that you signed with your own trust. And you have to have somebody in that trust that has no name similar to yours or your family's name actually sign it, a legitimate person. So bring somebody in as one of the trustees that's a close friend with a different name. Get them to
Good.
sign it and then actually make payments to the trust because you're paying yourself. And then the trust will make the payments to the mortgage lender.
Okay, so cut it because we're at literally, and here is why I say that. First of all, my head is blown. So let me get a minute. But secondly, that is a great segue into the third segment when we
Yes.
start to talking about leverage and how to pan all of this stuff out and really scale and get to the next level past debt elimination. So I want to recap a little bit. You talked to us about a hardship letter. First of all, we need to know you. Before we get to the hardship letter, let's just say this: contact Paul. All right. That's the first thing. But secondly, the importance of the story, the hardship letter, being able to articulate earnings potential and just kind of the story behind what happened and
Yes.
how that has an impact on eliminating debt. And then knowing, for lack of a term, the legal ease, what to say, what not to say to
Exactly.
debt collectors, right? And what triggers another statute of limitations versus being able to ride that out and negotiate it in your favor. Thirdly, do you want Bubba's mechanic working on your car, or do you want somebody who's degreed in this? In other words, do you want an amateur at the table or somebody with 50 plus years of business experience? No brainer right there, right? And then finally, understanding now how to work credit and debt elimination simultaneously,
Yes.
knowing that we don't have to drown in the process, but there really is a life raft that you can create in the midst of that that can help you get to a better economic position. I'm going to lean in. My God, Bill, come on. Paul, that's invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. And for those who have experienced really detrimental business outcomes in the last year and prior to that, knowing that you're possible and this is possible, and all we have to do is come in, connect the dots, and then partner with you in that. How many people, how many businesses are going to be saved by that? Now, we have literally 2 minutes. Tell people, besides contacting us, tell people how they can connect with you personally for consultation.
Okay, I have a couple of different emails you can use. One is paul@wisewealthchoices.com, and it's WISE, wisewealthchoices.com. That's one email. Or another one that uses my personal email is justcallpaul@gmail.com. So everybody used to say that. I became the answer when they say just call Paul@gmail.com. And I'll get the messages. Also, you can go to my LinkedIn page, which is just Paul Schumann. So it's linkedin.com/IN/Paul Schumann. You'll see me with 10,000 contacts. You'll see articles on debt and credit and all sorts of stuff. I'll be starting to input. And right now I'm rebuilding my website. So again, it's going to have a lot more information in the future. Right now it's kind of sketchy because I had 40 years of real estate information, which I'm pulling off of that, and I'm putting in more of the debt and stuff, but I'll have a real estate section and a mortgage section to explain what you need to do a year in advance to get the best loan in the industry. And trust me, it could take some people a year to build their credit up to get into that 740 plus area. So they got the absolute best loan, like a 1.99% interest rate loan in the industry for real estate. And it takes some strategy, and it takes time, and it takes discipline.
It does.
The one thing you want ever do if you're ever going to go buy a house is 6 months before that, don't ever buy a car. Don't ever run up your credit cards. Save the money and pay everything down. Your credit utilization will then decrease, and therefore your score will go up. You'll get a better shot at a loan.
So
It
pause
also
right
shows
there.
you better.
So don't go any further, because that's a whole nother segment. Don't give
Yeah,
them
it
all
is.
the good stuff now, because that's a good segment. So you all, I knew we would run up to the minute. You're sitting here with over 50 years of content. He can rattle off his head in his sleep.
I
So
could spend
that's
hours and hours on this. As a matter of fact, I have on some podcasts. I run an hour. It was supposed to be 20 minutes. It ran an hour. And I didn't even scratch the surface.
And that's my point. We do appreciate you, Paul, for all of the content. My God, just a wealth of information that you freely give and share. But let's just say this. You are worth your weight in gold when it comes down to helping American business owners and citizens alike get out of terrible situations. So we're here at the end of the show. We've gone past our time. Make sure you contact Paul. He has a wonderful cowboy hat on his picture. You'll know him right away. He's got the 10-gallon hat on. We love that in Texas. And make sure you contact Paul for debt elimination, negotiations. Find out what your options are. I guarantee you, after talking to Paul, you'll find out it may not be as dire as you think. With all of these years of experience, I can almost guarantee he's got a strategy to get you through it. So this is the end of the show. Thank you all for contacting. Thank you all for connecting with us. I am Ms. Mogul. Make sure you go to Facebook and connect with our Facebook page, Master Your Morning with Ms. Mogul. Subscribe to You Can Create Your Own Economy.com. I'm going to have Paul on that one for a segment. And mommiescreatingeconomies.com. If you're interested in real estate education, learning how to invest like a mogul, you need to go to mommiescreatingeconomies.com. And I'm going to see if we can talk to Paul about merging some classes or content there as well. That's another conversation. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Paul, for waking up so early in the morning and joining me for this conversation. It's always wonderful. So thank you again for all you do for American business owners, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you this time next week. Bye-bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Shardy. You're wonderful.
Thank you, Paul. Hold on. Be right back, y'all.